Imagine waking up strapped to a table. You don't know where you are. You don't know what day it is. The last thing you remember, you were captured. Now, men in white lab coats are walking toward you, not to save you, to use you. This is not a horror film. This is not fiction. This happened in real life, on an industrial scale, and the people responsible, most of them, never faced justice. Welcome to Unit 731, Japan's secret death factory, the setup. It's 1932, Manchuria, China, occupied by Imperial Japan. In the city of Harbin, on the outskirts, a massive compound is being built. From the outside, it looks like a lumber mill. That was the cover story. The official name, Epidemic Prevention and Water Purification Department. The real name, known only internally, Unit 731. The man behind it all, Lieutenant General Shiro Ishii, a doctor, a patriot, and by every modern definition, a monster. Ishii had one obsession: biological warfare. He believed that if Japan could weaponize disease, plague, cholera, typhoid, they could win any war without firing a single bullet. But to develop those weapons, he needed test subjects, not rats, not animals, humans. He called the prisoners maruta, which in Japanese means logs, because officially they were just lumber being processed at the mill. Men, women, children, Chinese, Korean, Russian, Mongolian prisoners. Estimated 3,000 to 10,000 people were killed inside that compound.
Inside the compound, the Pingfong facility was enormous. Over 150 buildings, a prison block, labs, autopsy rooms, incinerators. There was even a bar and a brothel for the soldiers, right next to the place where human beings were being dissected alive. Let that sink in. The prisoners were kept in small cells, Block 7 and Block 8, referred to as row blocks, meaning jail. They were fed enough to stay alive, barely.
Because you can't experiment on a dead body. Now let's talk about what actually happened inside. 1. Vivisection, live dissection. Prisoners were surgically cut open while fully conscious. No anesthesia. Why? The scientists believed anesthesia would contaminate the results. They removed organs. They studied how disease spread through a living, breathing human body in real time. Stomachs, livers, hearts, removed while the person was still alive and aware. 2. Frostbite and freezing experiments.
Prisoners were taken outside in Manchurian winters, temperatures reaching -40 degrees Celsius. Their arms were submerged in water, then exposed to freezing air. Researchers would tap the limb with a stick to check if it had frozen solid. When it made a wooden sound, they knew it was done. They would then treat the frozen limb by pouring boiling water on it or exposing it to fire. The goal, to find the best way to treat frostbite in Japanese soldiers.
3. Pressure experiments. Prisoners were placed in pressurized chambers. The air pressure was increased rapidly, simulating extreme altitude or depth. Researchers documented what happened as the human body was pushed past its limits. Eyes bulging, blood vessels rupturing, organs expanding. All recorded, all documented. 4. Disease injection. This was Unit 731's main mission: bioweapons research.
Prisoners were directly injected with live plague bacteria, cholera, typhoid, anthrax, syphilis. They were then observed as the disease progressed. No treatment was given. Some prisoners were forced to eat food laced with disease. Some had disease-carrying fleas released into their cells. All of this was measured, cataloged, written into research papers. 5. Weapons testing on living humans. Prisoners were tied to wooden stakes in an open field. Bombs filled with plague-infected fleas were detonated nearby. The researchers, wearing full hazmat suits, stood at a safe distance and watched. They needed to see how far the biological contamination spread, how long before symptoms appeared, how quickly it killed. The prisoner was the data point. 6. Surgery and organ experiments. Limbs were amputated and reattached to opposite sides of the body. Portions of the brain, lungs, and liver were removed to observe how long a person could survive. Blood was replaced with horse blood or salt water in live subjects. Human beings were used like machines to answer questions that no ethical scientist would ever ask. The field operation. Unit Unit 731 wasn't just a lab, it was an active military weapon. Between 1937 and 1945, Unit 731 conducted field operations across China. Low-flying aircraft dropped plague-infected fleas over Chinese cities, Ningbo, Changde, Huachu. Outbreaks of plague followed. Thousands of Chinese civilians died. Wells were contaminated with cholera and typhoid bacteria. Food supplies were poisoned and left for enemy troops to find. In one operation, ceramic bombs filled with plague fleas were dropped over 11 Chinese cities. This is considered one of the first large-scale biological warfare attacks in modern history. Estimates suggest Unit 731's field operations killed between 200,000 and 580,000 people, mostly civilians.
The cover-up. Here's where the story gets even darker. In August 1945, as Japan surrendered, Shiro Ishii gave one final order: destroy everything. The compound was blown up. Documents were burned, remaining prisoners executed, shot, gassed, or incinerated. The bodies of those who had already died were burned in the on-site incinerators. Ishii then fled to Japan, and here's what will make your blood boil. The United States knew. After the war, American investigators from the Biological Warfare Division arrived in Japan. They found Ishii. They found his researchers. They found the data, detailed human experimentation data that America's own scientists had never been able to gather because it required killing people. A deal was made: immunity from war crimes prosecution in exchange for the research data. Every single member of Unit 731's leadership was granted immunity. Shiro Ishii lived until 1959. He died of throat cancer at home as a free man. Compare that to Nazi doctors like Josef Mengele, who spent decades hiding, hunted. Unit 731 scientists, many of them went on to become prominent physicians, academics, and businessmen in post-war Japan. Some founded pharmaceutical companies. Some became presidents of medical universities. The world largely looked away. Why? It stayed hidden. For decades, Japan's government denied Unit 731 officially existed. It wasn't in school textbooks. It wasn't taught in history classes. Survivors, mostly Chinese and Korean, spoke out. Nobody listened. It wasn't until the 1980s that Japanese historian Seiichi Morimura published The Devil's Gluttony, a detailed book exposing the unit. Even then, the Japanese government was slow to officially acknowledge it. In 1994, a Japanese court refused to compensate Chinese survivors and families, ruling that the statute of limitations had expired. Think about that. The victims waited 50 years for acknowledgement and got nothing. Today, the Unit 731 Museum stands in Harbin, China, built on the ruins of the original complex. Over 300,000 visitors go there every year because the world must never forget the lesson. So why does this story matter today? Because Unit 731 is not just a history lesson about Japan or World War II. It's a lesson about what humans are capable of when three things align: ideology, power, and the dehumanization of other people. The moment you call someone a log, a maruta, instead of a human being, you've opened a door that's very hard to close. These weren't monsters from another species. They were doctors, scientists, people with medical degrees and academic credentials. People who were probably told they were doing it for their country, for science, for the greater good. And they crossed every possible line of human decency. The second lesson: accountability matters. When powerful nations decide that useful information is more valuable than justice for victims, they set a precedent. That precedent has consequences. Unit 731 is one of the most under-discussed atrocities of the 20th century. More people know about Josef Mengele than Shiro Ishii. And the reason is simple: politics. If you made it to the end of this video, share it. Not because it's entertaining, but because these victims deserve to be remembered. They were not logs. They were human beings, and their story will not be erased.